speech, I have a confession to tell all of you guys. I hate physics. I love science, but I just hate physics. And I can describe in a million words why I hate it, but I'm not going to do that because this speech is about rockets. So what exactly is a rocket? A rocket is a missile, spacecraft, aircraft, or other vehicle that obtains a thrust from a rocket engine. The first rockets were used in China around the 13th century in war as explosive projectiles and for recreational purposes. In the United States, during the Apollo 11 mission, the Saturn V brought Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin to the moon in 1969. They completed President Kennedy's dream made almost a decade prior, sending the first men to the moon. Not only was this event historically significant at a time where the U.S. was faced with the Cold War, this accomplishment put them ahead of the Soviets in the space race and gave hope to many that there would be future space explorations. From learning about rockets in class, we were inspired to build our own model rockets. The first rocket we built was called the Amazon, which is this rocket right here. It was fairly simple to construct, as all of its parts were already included in the kit, which is the case for most model rockets, and it only required gluing and assembling. To construct the rocket, the first thing we had to do was glue the launch lug, which is this thing right here on the rocket, where the rod will go through when you launch it, and the fins to the body tube, which is this whole tube of this rocket. The next thing we had to do was tie the parachute and shock cords to the nose cone of the rocket. The recovery wadding was then placed in before the parachute and the nose cone, so it would not melt from the igniting engine. Finally, the engine, igniter wire, and plug were placed right before we launched the rocket. For the second rocket we made, it was basically following the same steps, although we had to assemble the engine mount, this piece right here with this weird wire sticking out, ourselves, and we got to spray paint our own design to make it personal and unique. Some technicalities we faced during the field launch of these rockets included the wires touching, causing them to short circuit with each other, and the rockets not to launch. However, once we separated them, the engines of the rockets were able to ignite without any problem. Before we actually launched our rockets, we had to understand exactly how they worked. The most important thing to keep in mind was Newton's third law of motion, which states that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. To test this out, our class did many experiments, such as sitting on a chair and throwing a book while on the chair. The chair had wheels, so first we sat on the chair, then we threw the book while our feet were lifted up. The force exerted from the push of the textbook caused us to move backwards. The same thing happened when you shoot a Nerf gun. The force exerted from the dart coming out of the gun causes your hand to push back as well. This concept tied into building the model rockets because the same thing could be applied to the engines. The rocket engines are made of 4 distinct layers: the ejection charge, the smoke delay, the propellant, and the nozzle. The igniter wires are placed into the nozzle of the engine. As we press the button on the controller to ignite the rockets, a spark from the wires causes the propellant, in this case gunpowder, to go off, causing a thrust that will allow the rockets to launch. High pressurized gas from the exhaust push against the bottom of the rockets, causing it to move upward. The rocket pushes on its exhaust, causing the gases to move downwards. And this is how the rockets are able to launch successfully. Let me remind you guys once again that I hate physics. However, from learning about rocketry, I learned just how important this topic is in the whole process and have opened my eyes and my mind not to be ignorant of this topic just because I dislike it. Building model rockets and learning a little bit of space and physics at the same time was an enjoyable experience for me, as I was able to combine the knowledge of my 2 favorite subjects, science and history together in a way to fully understand why rockets are so important and why they are built the way they are. This experience has taught me to look past the technicalities of constructing something that I had very little knowledge of prior to this and just have fun.